Here is Henry VIII's tomb, and they know that in there are the bodies of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour. Now that is an interesting topic.
For centuries, King Henry VIII's tomb was imagined as a grand monument befitting his power and legacy. Yet, beneath St. George's Chapel lies a scene far from regal: a fractured coffin, scattered bones, and secrets long buried under stone. When the royal vault was finally opened, what emerged defied every expectation. The king's remains in disarray, surrounded by mystery. Was this the eternal resting place Henry envisioned, or something far more unsettling? Beneath Windsor Castle, the truth of England's most infamous monarch tells a darker, forgotten story. The Forgotten Vault. For centuries, it was widely believed that King Henry VIII rested undisturbed in a grand royal tomb, befitting his status as one of England's most powerful monarchs. History told a story of a magnificent burial in a carefully prepared chapel, an eternal resting place designed to immortalize his reign. Yet, when the burial chamber beneath the choir of St. George's Chapel was re-examined centuries later, the reality was shockingly different. The vault where Henry was laid to rest was not only modest, but its exact location had slipped into obscurity over time. What was expected to be a marvel of royal commemoration had become a forgotten chamber, hidden beneath layers of stone and silence. The vault's disappearance from collective memory was not simply due to neglect. It had originally been intended as a temporary resting place for Henry VIII, awaiting transfer to an enormous tomb he had long planned but never saw completed. Because of this, no permanent marker or detailed record was left to identify the chamber's location. Over the following decades, as Windsor Castle underwent renovations, changes in political power, and shifts in religious practices, knowledge of the vault's position faded further. Even clergy serving at St. George's Chapel provided vague or contradictory answers when asked about Henry's tomb. Despite the lack of clear records, life continued as usual above the vault. Worshippers prayed, choir boys rehearsed, and tourists unknowingly walked directly over the remains of a king who had reshaped England's history. The floor stones above showed no distinguishing marks separating Henry's vault from ordinary structural elements, turning his resting place into an invisible secret beneath the chapel. Superstitions and fears of disturbing royal graves added another layer of protection, deterring anyone from attempting to locate or open the tomb. The rediscovery of the vault was accidental and almost cinematic in nature. Workers carrying out routine repairs at the chapel noticed a floor slab shifting strangely beneath their feet. Before anyone could react, the stone gave way, revealing a cold, dark space many generations had never seen. The air that escaped from the newly exposed chamber had not felt open to the world for centuries. The breakthrough sparked immediate curiosity, but also a sense of unease, as people recognized the significance and fragility of what had been uncovered. Inside that vault lay 3 large lead coffins, including the unmistakable place where Henry VIII had been buried. But even at this early moment, it was clear this was no ordinary burial chamber. The condition of the coffins and what they contained would challenge long-held beliefs about the king's final resting place. The vault held secrets that were layered in both history and mystery, waiting to be slowly unraveled. Each detail hinted at a story more complex than anyone had imagined. The significance of this forgotten vault extended beyond just Henry VIII. It also contained the remains of Jane Seymour, Henry's 3rd wife and mother of his only legitimate son. Later, the coffin of Charles I, executed monarch of a later century, was hastily placed inside the same cramped space. This unexpected gathering of royal remains turned a simple burial vault into a historical puzzle connecting multiple eras of England's monarchy. Yet, the vault itself remained silent about the events and damage concealed within. The centuries-long obscurity of Henry's tomb raises troubling questions about how history remembers figures of power. For a king so obsessed with legacy and control over his image, his burial place becoming lost and damaged reflects an ironic twist of fate. How did such a significant tomb become an afterthought, its identity forgotten by those who came after? The answer lies partly in the decisions made during Henry's lifetime, and partly in the chaotic events that followed his death. While the vault had vanished from memory, the mysteries it contained only deepened with time. The initial rediscovery was just the beginning, a gateway to understanding the king's last years and the strange afterlife of his burial. Soon, the state of the vault and its coffins would reveal unsettling truths that history had failed to prepare anyone for. The quiet secrets beneath the chapel floor were about to emerge into the light. As the story of this lost chamber unfolds, a closer look at Henry VIII's health and death reveals the grim physical reality behind the king's final days and the challenge it posed for those charged with his burial. Henry VIII's decline. Henry VIII's final years were marked by a dramatic and painful decline that contrasts sharply with the image of the athletic and vigorous young king who once dominated tournaments and battlefields. Eyewitness accounts from the Tudor court describe a ruler who could barely move without assistance. His body, once lean and muscular, had grown so large that special lifting devices were needed simply to raise him from his bed. This drastic transformation was both physical and symbolic of the erosion of his health and power. Compounding his weight gain, Henry suffered from severe leg ulcers that refused to heal, causing constant agony. These sores emitted a foul odor so strong that those around the king could smell the infections long before he entered a room. Toxic and painful, his wounds became a defining feature of his deteriorating condition. Some historians speculate that Henry may have had a metabolic disorder affecting his circulation, but no definitive medical diagnosis exists from the period. The king's physical suffering took a toll that was seen by many at the court. The courtiers remarked upon it, saying the king was looking as if he was dying not only for months, but even years leading up to his death. The combination of Henry's huge size, chronic pain, and fatigue severely restricted his movements and the quality of his life. He was a shadow of what he used to be, imprisoned in a body that was not his ally anymore.
Weighing nearly 400 pounds. Doctors report that he has badly ulcerated legs. He's unable to walk. His eyesight is fading.
The decline in Henry's health has led to interpreting his death, and especially the burial preparations, differently. Tudor's practice of embalming was not firmly established at the time of Henry's death in January 1547. It was basically a controlled combination of spices, oils, alcohol, and layers of linen wraps that were to do the very short-term preserving of the body. Decomposition would be slowed down to some extent by these methods, but not in Henry's case, as he was already in an advanced stage of decay. Thus, the situation was much more complicated than just typical funerary care. The embalmers were having a hard time managing the corpse of a person who had experienced decomposition even before death, and thus, the royal preparations became very difficult. The difficulty was further complicated by Henry's remarkable size. A coffin for him had to be made to order, bigger than the ordinary ones, and thick sheets of lead had to be used as the lining. This thick lead lining was supposed to seal off the smells and juices of the body's decaying, but it also had a side effect. It encapsulated the gases generated during the decomposition process. The gases pushed the pressure up inside the airtight coffin. Hence, the cracking or bursting of the coffin became a very serious problem for the deceased king's transfer to Windsor. Even with the worries, the corpse of Henry was put in a temporary grave with that of Jane Seymour at St. George's Chapel, with the intention of later moving it to the grand tomb which he had designed. But the burial was done hurriedly, and some of those present feared that the body had already begun to respond to the internal pressure in the coffin's lead case. At first, such fears were dismissed, but they were not completely forgotten for the next generations, while the vault remained closed. However, the doubts of those days were a pointer to the king's remains being in a very bad state. Understanding Henry's decline is crucial to appreciating why his burial and the state of his tomb diverged so sharply from the grand vision he once held. But the story deepens as we examine the extraordinary challenges faced by the embalmers trying to preserve a royal corpse that defied tradition and expectation. The Embalming Challenge. Preparing a royal body for burial in Tudor England was a specialized task with no fixed rules, and the embalmer assigned to Henry VIII faced unprecedented difficulties. Unlike ordinary nobles, a king's body demanded careful treatment to preserve dignity and delay decay. Tudor methods relied on aromatic spices, oils, alcohol, and linen wrappings to preserve the corpse temporarily. However, these techniques were designed for bodies in fairly stable condition, not one already decomposing. Henry VIII's enormous size made the embalming process even more complicated. His coffin had to be vastly larger than normal and lined thickly with lead to hold in the odors and moisture from decomposition. Lead lining was a common practice for royalty to prevent leakage of fluids and smells. Unfortunately, it also trapped gases generated by the breakdown of tissues. As the body decomposed, internal pressure in the airtight coffin steadily increased, turning the container into a precarious, sealed vessel. The funeral procession itself exposed the unsettling consequences of this pressure buildup. While moving Henry's coffin from London to Windsor Castle, the procession stopped at a religious house near the city. There, witnesses reported dark fluid leaking from the coffin, pooling on the floor. Some chroniclers even described dogs drawn to the liquid, licking it before they were chased away.
There are unconfirmed stories of the king's corpse exploding while the coffin rested overnight. It's said that some of the king's liquefied remains leaked from the coffin, attracting stray dogs eager to lick up the mess.
These accounts sparked whispers of divine disapproval, suggesting a supernatural warning tied to Henry's controversial reign. Embalmers of the Tudor period simply did not have the means to deal with such extreme internal decay and pressure. The traditional use of oils, spices, and wrappings slowed surface decay but could not reverse or fully halt the processes happening inside a massive corpse. The physical constraints of the coffin and embalming methods meant the body's decomposition created problems no one was prepared to manage. This failure, combined with the king's poor health at death, set the stage for the damaged and unstable condition of Henry's coffin discovered so many years later. The embalming challenge was not just a technical problem, but a reflection of the limits of Tudor mortuary science confronted by an uncommonly large and decomposing royal corpse. As these embalming challenges tell part of the story beneath the chapel floor, shadows lengthen with another mystery, a tomb designed to be the greatest royal monument in English history that was never completed, setting another layer of meaning over Henry's final resting place. The incomplete tomb and the secrets of Henry's burial chamber deepen the mystery that began with the rediscovery of the forgotten vault. The funeral incident. The journey of Henry VIII's coffin from London to Windsor Castle was far from ordinary. During the procession, the coffin was stopped at a religious house near the city, Sion Abbey, where witnesses reported a disturbing sight. Dark fluid was said to have seeped from the lead-lined coffin, pooling on the floor beneath it. This unsettling phenomenon immediately caught the attention of those present and sparked rumors that went beyond mere physical decay. Some chroniclers later claimed that dogs entered the hall, drawn by the mysterious liquid, and licked it, before attendants hurried them away. Such details fueled widespread anxiety about what the substance might signify. Was it simply natural decomposition escaping the confines of the sealed coffin, or was it a supernatural omen? The theory of divine disapproval surfaced quickly, reflecting the tensions and uncertainties surrounding Henry's reign and his controversial decisions. The reports of leaking fluid and the presence of animals created a sense of foreboding among those responsible for the king's burial. Even if exaggerated, these accounts reveal the deep unease felt by the royal household and local observers. It was clear that Henry's body was behaving in ways that traditional embalming practices could not contain. The physical reality of decay became entangled with spiritual fears. Attendants at the time expressed quiet concerns that the burial had been rushed and that something about the coffin's condition was troubling. Some believed the body was already responding to the growing internal gas pressure within the lead lining. These worries were soon dismissed to avoid scandal and discomfort. But the unease never fully disappeared. The vault was sealed with a silent, uneasy acceptance of the unknown. This incident marked the beginning of a long history of mystery and damage surrounding Henry's remains. It also highlighted the limits of Tudor funerary customs in dealing with the corpse of Henry's unusual size and condition. The leaking fluid became an early sign of the larger problems hidden beneath the chapel floor, a physical symptom of the king's deteriorating body, struggling against its confinement. For decades and centuries, these unsettling reports hovered at the edges of Henry's story, overshadowed by his legendary rule, but never fully explained. They became part of a growing legend that complicated how his burial was remembered and interpreted. The dark fluid was a tangible reminder of the imperfections in a royal ritual that was meant to preserve dignity and power. More than a technical failure, the funeral incident also captured the complex emotions of a nation grappling with the death of a king who had drastically transformed England. His body's condition reflected the turbulence of his reign, both admired and feared. The leaking coffin stood as a metaphor for a monarchy under pressure, fragile yet defiant. This physical and symbolic fissure at Cyan Abbey echoed into the centuries that followed, as Henry's burial place became a source of mystery rather than majesty. The incomplete tomb above ground only deepened the contrast between the king's expectations and the fate of his remains. What lay beneath the surface was a story waiting to be uncovered. As the vault remained sealed and forgotten, attention turned to the monumental tomb Henry VIII had obsessed over, an ambitious project lost to time and circumstance, revealing another side of his legacy that never reached completion. The Lost Mega-Tomb. King Henry VIII was not content with just any tomb. He dreamed of a monument that would outshine every royal burial in England, a statement of power and permanence unlike any other. His father, Henry VII, was interred in a beautiful chapel at Westminster, but Henry wanted something bigger, darker, and more impressive. He envisioned a tomb that would serve as a lasting reminder to future monarchs of his unmatched authority. Among the crown's possessions was the unfinished tomb of Cardinal Wolsey, once England's most powerful church official and Henry's close advisor until he fell from favor. After Wolsey's downfall, Henry seized the tomb and repurposed its materials for his own monument. However, when he examined the original design, he found it far too modest for a king of his stature. He ordered a new, more elaborate design that was larger, heavier, and crowded with religious iconography. This ambitious project was intended to be wrapped in black marble, adorned with gilded angels, prophets, apostles, and life-sized figures of Henry and Jane Seymour lying in state. Workshops near Westminster bustled with activity as skilled Italian artists, sculptors, and metalworkers were commissioned to bring the vision to life. The design evolved continuously as Henry demanded additional details, symbols of victory, and representations of royal power. One striking element was a full-size effigy of Henry cast during his lifetime, meant to immortalize the king's image as a ruler who never weakened. Plans for the tomb included carved pillars, heavy candle holders, and extensive relief panels depicting biblical scenes intertwined with symbols of monarchy. The monument was to occupy an entire chapel, dominating its surroundings as a testament to Tudor grandeur. However, the grand project was halted by harsh realities. Wars against France and Scotland drained the royal treasury, and funds that once overflowed toward the tomb were redirected toward military campaigns and fortifications. Payments to artists slowed and eventually stopped, causing Italian sculptors and other craftsmen to depart England. The pieces of the monument were left unfinished and scattered, stored away without assembly. When Henry died, he still believed the monument was nearing completion, as reflected in the instructions of his will. In truth, no substantial work had happened for some time. His children, Edward, Mary, and Elizabeth, who faced their own struggles and political upheavals, showed little interest in completing their father's tomb. The dream of a monumental resting place faded into neglect. Ultimately, many parts of the unfinished tomb were sold, reused, or melted down over time. Some elements were repurposed in the tombs of other national figures, while others vanished entirely, absorbed into churches across Europe. The greatest royal tomb in English history quietly disintegrated, fragmented in both stone and memory. Meanwhile, Henry VIII's actual burial place was a simple vault, never intended as permanent. As his monumental tomb crumbled into pieces above ground, his remains rested beneath an unmarked floor.
And the coffin in the middle, that looks to be in such a sad state of repair, so damaged and broken up, belongs to Henry VIII. I think we might all be able to agree that this is certainly not what Henry VIII would have had in mind.
A stark contradiction to the king's original vision. The contrast between ambition and reality adds a haunting layer to the story of Henry's death and legacy. The unfulfilled tomb reflects not only political and financial constraints, but also the shifting priorities of England's rulers and society. While Henry sought to immortalize himself in marble and gold, history carved a very different fate. One of forgotten chambers, damaged coffins, and mysteries that would challenge historians and archaeologists centuries later. The uneasy burial and lost tomb set the stage for further complexity in the vault's history, as later disturbances would bring to light even more secrets beneath the chapel floor. Double burials and hidden damage. The vault that held Henry VIII's remains did not remain undisturbed for long. Decades after his burial, England faced a tumultuous period marked by the execution of King Charles I in 1649. Parliament feared that any grand or public mourning for Charles could ignite loyalist uprisings, so they insisted on a secretive, low-profile burial. Windsor Castle, remote and secure, was chosen as the final resting place, far from the riots and political unrest of London. During the hurried search for a suitable vault within the castle, officials recalled the vague references to a burial chamber beneath the choir of St. George's Chapel. Though the location had been forgotten for generations, the old records suggested a vault that had once contained royal remains. When workers pried up stones and peered inside, they unexpectedly rediscovered the long-lost tomb of Henry VIII, and by extension, the vault where Henry VIII was also interred. Inside, the vault held 3 lead coffins.
Henry's body was then taken from London to Windsor, where he was then laid to rest in the same vault as Jane Seymour, his third wife.
Jane Seymour's coffin lay on one side, while Henry VIII's rested defiantly in the center. Now, to add complexity, Charles I's coffin was forced into the already cramped space without delay or ceremony. The burial was rushed, cold and tense. The men working had to lift and maneuver Charles's heavy lead coffin in a vault that was too small to move comfortably, resulting in accidental shifting of the other coffins. Later examinations suggest that during this hurried insertion, the wooden supports beneath Henry's coffin strained or even broke. Henry's massive coffin, already under pressure from decomposing gases trapped within its lead lining, may have cracked or become unstable at this moment. This damage was not immediately apparent, but would shape the vault's fate in the centuries to come. The irony of placing Charles I inches from Henry VIII was not lost on observers. One monarch had expanded royal power to unprecedented heights. The other lost his head defending similar authority. Some historians see this closeness as a symbolic reflection of England's long and painful struggle with monarchy and rebellion. Others suggest it was merely a practical choice made amidst chaos and urgency with no deeper intention. Either way, it added tension to a vault already burdened with history. Once Charles was laid to rest, the vault was resealed and returned to secrecy. However, the disturbances caused by the rushed burial left hidden damage. Over time, this damage would emerge in subtle ways, leaving physical marks and disturbances to the already fragile remains. The vault held two kings separated by a century, but joined by the legacy of power, death, and secrecy. In the years that followed, the vault remained closed and largely forgotten. Political tides shifted, and the monarchy was restored, but the secrets below the chapel floor stayed concealed. Reports from those allowed brief glimpses kept to themselves the full extent of the vault's instability and the damage that lurked beneath. The quiet tension in the tomb echoed the unsettled times outside its stones. Despite its hidden state, the vault was far from stable. The consequences of that cold winter night in the mid-17th century were quietly shaping the condition of Henry VIII's coffin. The lead casing, strained under unseen pressure, began to buckle and fail, setting the stage for a later discovery that would shock future generations. The closeness of these royal coffins was more than just physical. It symbolized a vault weighed down by history, politics, and the frailty of human remains trapped in time. What lay ahead would unearth more than stone and bone. It would reveal the cracks in England's royal story itself. The shattered coffin. When the vault beneath St. George's Chapel was finally reopened centuries later, the scene that greeted workers was one of unsettling ruin. Henry VIII's coffin, positioned at the center of the cramped chamber, was a stark contrast to the relatively intact coffins of Jane Seymour and Charles I on either side. His lead casing was buckled, torn, and collapsed in multiple places, its wooden supports completely broken and unable to hold the coffin upright. The coffin lay tilted against the vault wall, a physical testament to the pressures and damage it endured over time. Long cracks ran across the metal surface, and parts of the lead appeared warped, as though something inside had pushed outward with tremendous force. This internal pressure was the lingering result of the gases generated by his decomposing body, trapped and building beneath the coffin's heavy lead shell. Closer examination revealed exposed bone near one of the ruptured edges. Thick and heavy, this bone was still attached to scraps of fabric and flakes of lead from the damaged coffin lining. Historians believe this was likely a leg bone, forced outward by the very pressure that shattered the container meant to protect and contain Henry's remains. The sight was a grim reminder of the physical realities hidden beneath centuries of history. Scattered across the vault floor were fragments not just of coffin wood and lead, but pale, jointed pieces that appeared to be human bones, small finger bones, and what seemed to be part of a hand. The idea that parts of Henry's body had been physically pushed out of his coffin and strewn about the chamber sent shockwaves through those who later studied the reports. It illustrated a violent breaking apart of what should have been a secure final resting place. The damaged remains discovery brought about new speculations regarding the treatment of Henry's body after his death. The coffin's broken condition was an indication that the forces inside had outdone the tricks of the Tudor embalmers and coffin makers, thus unearthing the limitations of the burial technology of the period. It shook the belief that a royal death was always accompanied by the finest preservation. The broken coffin and the moved remains led the authorities to quickly close the vault again, as they were afraid that a further opening could lead to an ecological disaster. The doctors who were summoned to the scene realized that the tomb had become fragile and any disturbance would be dangerous. The room turned into a closed mystery once again, with a lot of questions still remaining for the next generations to face. Amidst the fragile and tense atmosphere, the contrast of Henry's broken coffin and the untouched coffins of Jane Seymour and Charles I stressed the particularity of his burial. The tomb of Henry, unlike the others, had actually bent under pressure, not able to show the dignity and permanence that was expected of a king's resting place. This picture of destruction was not only a condition of the body, but also a condition of Henry VIII's tumultuous life and reign, the age of glory, suffering, and broken legacies. The tomb, pressed and cracked, was a reminder of the transience of even the greatest rulers that time had dealt with. A long time after, a more systematic research would expose these disturbing details totally, besides revealing even odder and more enigmatic discoveries that were buried with the broken coffin and the cramped vault. The fragile state of Henry's coffin pointed toward deeper mysteries beneath the chapel floor, where even stranger discoveries awaited, challenging historians' understanding of the vault's full story. The unexplained bones. When St. George's Chapel's royal vault was last examined, investigators uncovered a startling anomaly. Amid the shattered coffin of Henry VIII and the known royal remains lay a small cluster of loose bones, uncontained, undocumented, and belonging to no recorded burial. Their origin remains one of Windsor's enduring mysteries. The bones were not consistent with those of Henry, Jane Seymour, or Charles I, and no chapel records explained their presence. Some historians believe they may have belonged to an earlier burial displaced by later renovations or political upheavals. Others suggest they were hidden intentionally during times of unrest, when secret interments offered protection from desecration. The crypt itself reveals the sad story of the royal dead. The splendor of the past is replaced by decay and chaos, through the fractured coffins and the scattered pieces. The dark spot next to Henry's coffin, which may be the same liquid that was leaking from his body during the funeral procession, implies that the present condition of the chamber has been altered by decay and disturbance. The find sparked the discussion again about whether the vault should be opened up again in the future. On one hand, there are people who think that it should be sealed for good to maintain the holiness of the place and prevent the scandal, whereas others see the need to take the new studies that would help not only to clarify the Tudor burial practices to be clarified, but also to solve the centuries-old riddles to be solved. After all, the tomb of Henry VIII is a testimony to the transience he tried to eliminate to the end. The unidentified skeletons beneath the stone floors of Windsor Castle are located next to a king preoccupied with his image, a spectral reminder that even monarchs are unable to manage what time decides to cherish or to hide. Henry VIII's tomb was far from the grand resting place history imagined. Instead, it reveals a complex tale of decline, mystery, and secrets buried deep beneath Windsor Castle. The discoveries challenge our understanding of the past and remind us that even the most powerful leave behind unexpected legacies. If you found this story fascinating, be sure to like and subscribe for more incredible historical mysteries.